Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Hey, docs, I'm excited to bring you a interview with Christine Odell. As many of you know, if you've listened to this podcast over the years, Christine was instrumental in getting me back on track financially in my personal and professional life back in 2016, 2017. Probably rounded out into early 2018, we really got things rolling and got back on track. Just like anything, you make mistakes. We're not experts in finances, or at least many of us are not. And I had a great start to my career, great start to my practice. 2010 when we opened up, all the way to 2015. Things got rocky with insurances. I dropped insurances. Things got rocky in the personal life. But Christine was there to really help me understand personal and business finances. And she's just really, really good at what she does. And she's been on this show a handful of times and has been quite a resource for other chiropractors. And we dive into personal finances, and kind of overcoming inflation. It's obviously a real thing, and some things you can do, you and your significant others, to work around that. And she's got real life experience, real life strategies that you can implement. And she dives into that today, and provides you with a ton of information. And at the end, she's got an opportunity for you to learn more and how you can help get control of your finances. And it's been something that we really work with chiropractors a lot and talk about in our coaching programs, because it's you know as much as we don't want to make it about money all the times, those that have financial peace or cash flow confidence are functioning at a very high level and feeling good about their progression throughout their career and in their personal lives. And so we dive into some of those topics today. And so without further ado, here is my interview with Christine Odell. All right. I'm excited to have Christine Odell on the podcast. It's been a little while since you've been on. And, I always reference you and what you did to help me through different financial times, whether it was my own personal struggles in 2017 or our world struggles in 2020 with COVID and navigating all of that. But welcome to the show. What's new in your world?
Thanks, Dr. Christie. I'm so happy to be back. Um, well, the world is doing crazy things, and we had no idea 5 years from today what we were going to experience. And so I think today might be a similar situation. We have no idea what's coming. Um, but this is a great time for us to get ready for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was funny. My wife and I, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary a couple weeks ago, or I don't know when this episode comes out, but it was in July. We celebrated and we went back to Sonoma where we got married, and we kind of talked about the last 5 years together as far as our marriage. And it would have been 2019, July 2019, we got married. And it's kind of comical how much went on in the last 5 years.
That's a good statement to say. Yes, comical is good.
Many positives in my personal world and all that, but obviously the world's been tricky. And we're going to dive into the topic of inflation today. And I know that's hitting a lot of people. It's hitting us personally. It's hitting us as business owners and trying to navigate that. Obviously, if you're a chiropractor that works for someone, it's hard to navigate your own personal inflation costs and kind of your fixed pay. If you're a chiropractor that owns your practice, you're kind of getting hit uh, from both ends there, as far as your cost of living has gone way up, and then your cost of running a practice has gone way up. And I can guarantee you, your insurance reimbursement has not gone up, and if anything, it's probably gone down. But I'd like to start out with the history of inflation and uh, some of the history of that you've really dove into.
So, okay, first it's important to define what inflation means, because the idea is everything goes up in price. And so the actual definition is it's the change in your purchasing power. So if you're buying something, then you might have bought gas at 65 cents a gallon back in the 80s, but now it's, depending on where you are in the country, somewhere between $3 and $7 a gallon, right? And so part of that is the economy on where you are. Part of that is taxes. Part of that is 100 different things that go on. Part of that's also politics. So this is not a politics discussion, but it kind of is. So one of the things I did is when Dr. Christie asked me to do this, is I went back and I studied a little bit of um, what politics has to do with how inflation functions. Now, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, that doesn't matter in this, but it's good to understand the way it goes. So I went back to 1901 and listed all the presidents in order and how many years they were in office. And then I went back and said, are they Republican or Democrat? And then I went to the inflation rate tables and was kind of shocked at what I found. I kind of had an idea that years with Republican presidents, the inflation rates were historically lower. The only place that that was different was Nixon and Ford. We have a resignation of a president, vice president takes over, but those 8 years of time is where in the Republican Party was the only time inflation was really high, over the 4%. And the national average for inflation is 3%. So if you go back over time, you say 3% is the national average. Well, when Democrat president is in place, the inflation rate usually is well over 5%. In
Interesting.
some years, yes, very interesting. Um, in some years, and if you look at the overall term of a president, like if we go back to 45 to 53 with President Truman, he started with a 2.3% inflation rate, but by the end of his term, it was 14.4%. If you go back to Hoover, he started at a negative 2.3%. So your purchasing power was getting better. So it's opposite of it. The inflation is increasing, your purchasing power is less. If inflation is decreasing, your purchasing power is better. So in Hoover, it went from negative 2.3% to a negative 9%. So
Mm,
if you think back to the 50s of our parents and grandparents, they had lots of purchasing power. And we saw that in, you could buy a house on from Sears, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Because there was lots of purchasing power back then. But then if you bounce forward to 1995, from 1990, about 93, the inflation rate down to 3%. And if you go all the way up to when Trump got out of office, it stayed at 3% or lower that entire time. So we're looking at 25 years, an entire generation where this country experienced virtually no inflation rate. Biden comes into office, you can blame it on Biden, you can blame it on Democrats, you can blame it on COVID, you can blame it on 100 million different things. Suddenly we're at 8%. And we haven't seen 8% inflation rate since the Carter years.
Yeah, I remember growing up as a kid. I was born in 1980, and growing up as a kid, my parents talking about the 70s and how hard that was. And, it was interesting to your point in the 80s, when I was raised, I was an only child, so it's a little cheaper, but we were able to live off of my dad's income only. My mom was able to stay home with me, and my dad had a very middle class income. If you adjusted for whatever inflation and cost of living now, there's no way my dad would have been able to support without my mom working in today's environment. So it's definitely fascinating for sure to hear the history of that. And like, what are your thoughts on the? Because a lot of young chiropractors feel pretty down about the situation, and I get it. I think we all feel down about the situation, and I try to also reference 2008. Obviously, that was a different animal. I joke around. I would have been 28 then, and I was just getting started. But things were cheap, but nobody had any money. So it was a whole other level of frustration. And I remember having that where just like so many patients, like none of them had jobs and money, and you could lower your prices and buying a house was cheap, but just no one could afford to do anything because they had no money. Whereas you fast forward now, there's like people actually making good incomes theoretically, but then they can't afford anything. And it always seems like inflation has such a psychological impact on people. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think money has psychological impacts on people. Money is very emotional. So kind of that same thing. If we go back to the 90s, your average household income in the 90s was in the high $30,000. So let's just say $40,000. So that was the average. In the 90s was you're making 20 bucks an hour, and that's your average income. Bump to now, your average income, and this is all data I get off of government websites, by the way.
Mhm,
Average income is 102,000, which is $50 an hour. So in 25 years, we bumped $30 an hour.
mhm,
And this is kind of interesting. Like our wages went way up, but inflation was stagnant. And what I've been able to find from being a financial coach for so many years is our wants take over our needs,
mhm,
is that we want so much. So when I was growing up, we had one television and it was black and white. Yes, I just dated myself. But we also didn't have cable TV or cell phones. Um, I remember a long distance phone bill back then being over $100 at times. And so just what our needs are now. Now you walk into the average household, and we have bought a house in St. George, Utah, and we drive up the road in suburban America, and you can't park your car in your garage because there's so much stuff in the garage.
yeah,
We see this every single day. And we walk into a house and there's a television in every single bedroom. Every child has a cell phone. I mean, so a lot of our wants in life have over superseded our needs. So if we're battling inflation, one of the things I think is the most useful is to figure out how to do a budget for your family. There's 100 million theories on budgets, and here's the easiest one. Figure out what you absolutely have to survive. You need food, you need housing, you need transportation, and reasonable clothing, right?
mhm,
So if we're in crunch mode, we're not going to Neiman Marcus to buy a tank top. We're going to Walmart to buy a tank top,
yeah,
right? So we really need to focus on what our needs are, what we absolutely have to survive, and then gradually add in the wants.
mhm,
I think if we do that in a budgeting mode, then we can start seeing, oh my goodness, eating out twice a day, every single day of the week is probably not cost effective because that's a want every time. We need to
yeah,
eat, right?
yeah, and I wanted to touch on that because I had it down as one of my notes. There was a funny meme going and passing around. It wasn't fun. I mean, it was actually like a supposedly a poll or a study, and it said like, what is the household income needed to live comfortably? And it had a different states and it had different numbers, and some of the states were like 225,000 and this and that, and people were commenting. It's like, oh, you need to make 250,000 to live with a family of four, and I actually remember commenting on it. And I was like, I think a big problem is not necessarily what the number is to quote unquote live comfortably. I think as a society, we've changed what comfort is to us. And we almost like think of comfort as, like you said, is, um, sending the kids to private school. It's having the kids having 10 different pairs of shoes and, yeah, eating Uber Eats 2 to 3 times a week, Starbucks every day. Like it just, you start to think about again, and growing up in the 80s, I remember how fewer things I had or my family had or our house had than my current household, you know, and just the lifestyle creep that has happened to people. And I think it's because of social media. I think it's because of invention of things. Yeah, it's like nice to for everybody to have a cell phone, but when we were growing up, you had one wall, and you had one phone on one wall in the kitchen usually, and maybe you had one in another office bedroom or something, right? Now you've got death by a thousand cuts because people have Netflix subscription and Hulu and Amazon. Like they got 14 different things to watch TV on. Plus, they have their cable bill of $250 and their Wi-Fi, right? Like it's gotten
Right.
insane the amount of things you need or you think you need, right? And I think that's a big issue here for sure.
I do believe that that's a big thing. And I was actually recently talking with a client, and I was just, running through his bank statements with him. And like, what is this? And what is this? And what is this? And he's like, am I still paying 1,500 a month to them? And I'm like, okay, you make too much money if you're not noticing a $1,500 a month payment going to somebody you're not using, right? But it's that creep too, right?
Yeah.
So it's Apple Tunes, iTunes, Spotify, Netflix, Hulu. Once you add it all up, it's over $100 a month,
Mm,
and then that's $1,200 a year. And you're like, "Oh, dang, if I had 1,200 bucks right now, I'd do something different." Right?
yeah.
The cell phones are the same thing. And so that's why I always say, take yourself back to your vital needs. What exactly do you need to just live on?
Mhm.
And my husband and I did this recently too. We were headed to town and he likes to shop. And I'm like, okay, go shopping. How much money do we need for shopping? And he's like, I don't know, throw $1,000 in your purse. I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
We use paper money, not credit cards or debit cards. I
Mhm.
threw $1,000 in my purse and off we went. And we went in and out of stores. And he's like, you're not buying anything. I said, you said we were shopping. You didn't say we were buying. And there's a difference. People go in and out of stores and they buy a trinket at every one.
Mhm.
And I just kind of walked in and looked around. There's nothing I wanted. There's nothing I needed. So I just turned around and walked out. And he goes, we could get a new frying pan. I'm like, yeah, but the frying pan we have works just fine.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the things that you have to do when you're shopping. And I actually stopped going to Walmart 4 years ago, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic. I just realized one day, every single time I walked into Walmart, I spent $100.
Yeah.
And I was like, I walked through the store and I said, there's nothing I want to buy here. I don't want to buy food here. I don't want to buy anything else here. It's cheap plastic stuff. So we just don't shop at Walmart anymore.
Let's take a break from today's episode and announce our first sponsor. This is going to be Propel Marketing and Design. I've known Darcy Sullivan for years. We've worked hand in hand on my websites. I don't trust anybody else to do this search engine optimization. She does a great job. There's so much to it. A lot of the lingo and the words are beyond my comprehension, but it's just amazing work that she does. And if you're really going to get results with Google, you have to make sure your website is SEO optimized. And I really don't want you doing it yourself as a chiropractor. So you just have to have this type of stuff done. And if you're looking to get more organic online traffic that pulls in new patients, Propel Marketing and Design is currently offering chiropractors who listen to this podcast a free SEO website review. The free review will help you uncover methods that will improve your website and boost your search engine visibility. Head over to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor and schedule your free SEO website review. You won't regret it. She gets great results. Your website needs this. Your search results need this. Head on over there to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor to get your free SEO website review. On the flip side of that, and I'm gonna, you know, talk about it even from my perspective of my family is and we're in a very nice position financially and we're lucky for that. But our grocery bills, my wife shops at Whole Foods and I like to go to Fresh Market, which is here, and we do try to eat healthy and organic and things of that nature. And it's just astronomically expensive. And so if you find yourself where inflation is impacting you, you may have to consider going from, if you've been shopping at Whole Foods, you might want to go back to Publix or whatever one is in your region. That's like your regular grocery store here. Not that it's cheap, but it's definitely cheaper than Whole Foods and Fresh Market. So it's sometimes you gotta kind of go back on that. You still order good food or buy good food, but maybe not at the Whole Foods there.
So funny enough that you say that because it's something that I've hacked to death. If you stick on the outside of the grocery store and never go on the inside of the grocery store, you can save money on food because your body actually likes whole foods better than it likes plastic foods. So you can save a ton of money on that because you're not always hungry. That's one thing. Most of us live within 20 miles of a farm. And if you're in New York City, you don't count. Sorry, can't help you there. But most of that's there's actually farmers markets everywhere, and food at farmers markets are almost always cheaper than the grocery store if you're trying to cut and stay healthy. But I agree. Sometimes you do have to find the lesser expensive store for some things. But groceries is typically the last place I cut
Mhm.
because our bodies do not function well if we don't feed them right.
I agree with
So
that.
I'd
I agree
rather
with
see
that.
you cut with, you know, here's the things I don't cut. I do not cut my chiropractor, and that's not because I'm on this call. It's a necessity in my life. I feel the healthiest when I'm seeing my chiropractor. Um, the other thing I feel the healthiest is when I'm eating whole foods and taking really good supplements. Um, I don't feel healthiest when I sit down and watch TV all day. which by the way never happens. But even when we have like a TV day, because there's a blizzard going on in Colorado, um, at the end of the day, I'm like, gosh, what a waste of time. So we have cut all of those subscription accounts because
Mhm.
it doesn't make us feel good.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at needs, I think the other thing is what makes you feel good. So if you're part of a sports team and it makes you feel good, keep that, get rid of Netflix.
Mm.
Um, and I think that really helps people with the budgeting. Same thing with cell phones. I mean, I've done this phone for years. I have a track phone that I got years ago because my client said this was back when long distance wasn't free for everybody. Um, some of my clients said, I can't call you long distance. So I got a track phone. Track phones cost $20 for the phone and about $100 a year for plenty of minutes. You just can't do everything on your phone on that little mini computer. So there's a
Yep.
place there though. If you're looking at a $3,000 a year cell phone bill, you can cut that very, very quickly. So there's lots of things you can do, but the key is not to crush your budget so much that you don't feel good.
Mhm.
Because if you don't feel good or you're not having at least some of life in this country, then you will, by definition, bust your budget 100% of the time.
Yeah. No, that
You have
makes
to feel a
sense.
little bit normal.
And
So
then what
Starbucks
are
once a week instead of every day, a
there you
treat.
go. Yeah.
So
No, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. And I guess one of the things I wanted to make sure we talk about, because I know you specialize this pretty well, but and I've had conversation with a lot of chiropractors, and then it's the communication with the significant other and getting on the same page. And sometimes people don't like to talk about money. And uh, what are your thoughts and strategies around that, and making sure that the partnership there is on the same page and everybody's working towards the same goal?
I look at two sides of it. One side, Zig Ziglar says two people in a marriage just alike, one of you is unnecessary. So in most cases, one of you is a little bit better wired to manage the money than the other one. And so rather than making a fight out of it, like you didn't do this or you didn't do that, pick the person in the marriage who is better at managing the finances to handle the bulk of it. So making sure things get paid on time, making sure the bank account is reconciled, that we've looked through the credit card statements to make sure that what's on there we planned on spending and we did spend. The other thing is never use finances as a weapon because 78% of marriages in this country fail on finance fights. So don't make it a weapon. Use some other weapon. But instead, make it a communication point because our finances in this country are our value system. So make it a communication point. If you're not married yet and you're getting married, get somebody to help you before you get married and commingle everything. I do recommend that you commingle everything. I don't recommend that it's his money and her money and you have this job and I have that job. I actually do recommend you put it together because again, it's your value system. It can be the glue or it can be the weapon. So make it the glue that you're saying this is all of the money that we earn together and this is where we should spend it each month. And then do a budget each month. And then don't just do the budget and throw it in a corner. Keep it handy so you can look at it and say, how much did we budget for groceries and where are we in that plan? How much did we budget for household stuff and where are we in that plan? But use it as a tool. Um, I think that that's probably the most important. But understand that one of you, I mean, the same thing. One of us is a night owl, one of us is a morning person, right? If you're ever lucky enough to have somebody on the same page on both of those, that's awesome. But just make it so it's a point of communication. Um, too many times, if we separate it, our value systems go with that. And that's part of what the divorce is like, well, you have more money than me, so you get to spend more money than me. No, that doesn't work. You have less money, you get to spend less money. That doesn't work. If we put it all in the same pot and work on it together, that works really well.
And
Um,
then how often do you recommend a couple get together and talk about the budget or the finances and get on the same page with that?
honestly, everyone's gonna cringe when I say this. You probably ought to do it weekly.
Mhm.
But once you get used to it, weekly is a 10-minute conversation, not a 3-hour dissertation,
Yep.
right? It's where are we? Was there a cut and pay this week? Was there a bonus this week? Um, do we need to cut back somewhere? Did we overspend somewhere? Just to touch base on it. Monthly, we should probably say, like, this is if you this is the end of the month, we're gonna say, okay, next month, we're gonna sit down and say, we expect this much money to come in. Where do we want it to go next month? So you want to plan next month and the previous month. What I see happen most of the time is we try to plan this month at the end of this month.
Mhm.
And you can't do that because you can look back, but that you can't fix anything along the way. If you do that, you're going to be scrambling. And this is how we wander into debt in this country is that we're trying to plan the money after the money's already been spent. So if you want a guide a little bit, depending on where you live, let's just say Dr. Christie's in Florida. So some months of the year, the air conditioning is on 24/7. We don't go outside because it's steamy out there.
Yes.
Um, and so our electric bill is probably going to be higher in those months. But in the winter months, when the weather is really pleasant, we're going to be outside more. AC doesn't have to be up as high. So we don't have to pay as much in electricity in those months.
Mm.
And so if we're looking back, we want to say something like that, we probably need to average it over time. Same thing with kids' sports. A lot of times those are in the school year. Sometimes summer camps in the summer. So we just kind of want to, if we want to look back at the history, that's helpful. But going forward, what do we need for the next month?
Makes sense. Let's take a short break for one of our great sponsors, TrackStat. It is a new type of software plugin for your EHR that combines patient communication, marketing, automation, and statistics with patient and employee tracking. Built by chiropractors for chiropractors, it shows your team what to focus on each day. See patient visit habits, missing information, unpaid bills, insurance collection visit average, and more. Great visibility of data so you can focus on filling your office with your best patients. When you can see what your staff and patients are doing or not doing and take action accordingly, your profits naturally grow. Take TrackStat for a test drive in your office with our free trial. Not a techie, no problem, we can help. To get started on your free trial, visit trackstat.org and watch the demo. That is trackstat.org. Something I wanted to touch base on that because I feel like with this whole situation, we got inflation. It's things are getting more expensive. We can obviously budget and get some good frameworks there. Try to cut some expenses. So if inflation was 8%, can you last year can you find 8% to cut some of the coffees and this and that, and you can kind of get back to where you are. I think some of our chiropractors work. They get some bonuses. Obviously, I think you need a budget to where the bonuses are extra money, and you put that away, and then I think you got to avoid the lifestyle creep and try to make sure you're saving for retirement. And when you start to make more money, it doesn't mean that you go from the $20 bottle of wine 3 times a week to the $50 bottle of wine 3 times a week. So we want to avoid some of that. And it's also the idea of delayed gratification. Depending on the age that you are, you got to be willing to delay some of the gratification and reinvest some of that money into your future, into your business, um, because too often I see the personal um, budget gets out of hand, and so once they are over, and they take money from their business to pay for that personal overage, and so now they're draining their business of money that could impact their cash flow, or at worst, or at best, it's impacting their ability to reinvest that money into the business that could then obviously pay them dividends down the road for that, and having a level of delayed gratification. What are your thoughts on delayed gratification and some ideas around that?
Well, if you're talking about being a business owner,
Mm,
then the delayed gratification is actually a tax strategy
mm,
as well. So we have the choice as business owners, everything we earn minus everything we have to run our business, and then we have our profit and we can just give the rest of it, give a big portion of it to the government. That's one strategy. And most people are afraid of the government, so that's what they do. They end up overpaying the government. But if we're really sitting there and getting intentional about our money, which is a lot of what this call is about, then what if the end of the day, you look down and you say, oh, I have a profit. What if we take some of that profit and start investing in our retirement? Being used, 401ks, simple IRAs, SEP IRAs, all of those, or even traditional after tax, um, traditional, I take it back, traditional on the personal side. But in the business, um, you can invest quite a bit in yourself. And I use the tagline in my book, and oftentimes is how to make more by making less. And
Mhm,
so,
mhm.
as business owners, especially if you've had a wage job before that, business owners, we try to replace that wage. And I always encourage people as a business owner, don't try to replace that wage. Try to put as much expenses as you can that benefit you in your business. So things like creating benefits for yourself or your team, um, retirement accounts. Everybody thinks that they can't afford benefits for themselves or their team. And I can tell you that employees would prefer to have benefits because they don't want to be able to have to go outside with their take home pay and try to create these benefits for themselves. That's a very expensive place for them to do it. But in house, you almost can get away with paying a little less in wages to your team and create those benefits. They benefit you as a business owner and it benefits the team. And it creates a loyalty within the team as well. They're not going to run off to just a higher paying job unless they can run off to a higher paying job plus higher paying benefits.
Right.
So benefits is a great place to kind of delay that gratification on the take home pay
Yep.
if you're a
That
business owner.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is a great way. If you're a business owner, you do have some strategies that the non-business owner has to obviously stave off the inflation and some of your tax strategy aspects can be. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great way of doing that. I want to transition a little bit to the next thing. Because what's interesting about the inflation number, I know there's some other things that aren't in the CPI and all that, but something that's definitely not in the inflation number, which really skews the whole thing, is what I keep on hearing is the cost of money, which is if that car was $50,000 5 years ago, and that same car is $50,000 now, and you have to take a loan on that car to get it, the cost of that car is actually way more now because the interest rate is so much higher. Your monthly payment is higher. The cost of that vehicle over the terms of that, say 72 months, is way higher. Same thing you're seeing with buying a house. Like people's purchasing power is down on buying a house, not only because the house is more expensive, but the interest rate isn't 3% anymore. It's 7%, right? Like if I took my same house and let's say I bought mine in 2020 and I do have an interest rate of 3%. If I tried buying my same house at the same amount that I bought it for, it wouldn't be. But if I did, but it was at 7%, my monthly payment would be way more. And people's credit card interest rates are higher. I mean, it's all just the cost of money is higher. And so some folks are not only running into their cost of living and cost of running a business has gone up, but the cost of the debt that they have or that they want to take on is a lot more, and so that's causing an impact there. You've always been my debt specialist. What are some of your thoughts on that cost of money, and then what it would look like for them if they actually started paying down some debt, so that they're not running into payments that are bleeding into their budgets.
That's actually part of this whole conversation too. Um, well, as you know, I'm not a big fan of debt. Um, although in the past, well, just to go backwards, in 2001, my husband and I were over $500,000 in debt, and it wasn't a house. Um, by 2009, we paid it all off. So getting out of debt and staying out of debt was a big thing for us. Well, then in 2018, we decided to buy another house in another city, and I actually did take on a mortgage for that. And so I had to kind of backpedal and say, wait a minute, I'm going against what I'm telling people not to do.
Mhm.
But you're exactly right. The cost of money. So for us to buy that house would have wiped out most of our savings.
Mhm.
So taking out a mortgage, a reasonable mortgage, made sense. And so when you're going to buy a house, you definitely want what's a reasonable mortgage.
Mhm.
Um, ownership of a house is a great hedge on inflation, by the way. So kind of hand in hand. So if you're buying a house today at the 7%, understand that a loan is 30 years. And we just talked about the history, and depending on who's in office depends on inflation, which would also have a direct impact on interest rates. So if your rate right now is 7%, it's very unlikely for the next 30 years it's going to stay 7%.
Mhm.
There's going to be a window in there where the rates are going to dip again. And that's a great time to be ready to refinance. And potentially lower that payment and lower the amount of interest that you're paying out to the bank. So I would say don't if you're thinking about buying a house now and you're thinking interest rate's such a big problem, I would say go a smaller home and be ready. Get the rest of your ducks in a row over time because you still have to pay to someplace to live, right? Unless you're in a tiny house in a trailer park, you're still going to pay rent somewhere for something. And oh, by the way, trailer houses or tiny houses and trailer parks, not a bad thing, but it's a lesser thing, right?
Yep.
It's a
Yep.
very it's almost like living in a tent. So we're saying we still have to pay rent somewhere, which means we still have to pay something to live. So if you take that same amount possibly that you're paying in rent and say, okay, can I buy a home for that same dollar amount? It might be a smaller home to start. And nobody likes moving, but if we could buy maybe a $300,000 home or condo or something for now, ride out this interest rate thing for a while and be ready by getting rid of other debt in the meantime that we could buy a bigger house later. The
No, it
average people
makes
stay in their homes is only 8 to 13 years anyway.
yeah.
Okay, so we're just gonna look at that window a little bit. We get stuck on now, today. This is where it's always gonna be. But if we're looking to the future, there's gonna be inflation, but there's also gonna be fluctuations.
Plus, if you buy that house at the 7%, the house is gonna cost more money the longer you wait. And then if it somehow dips down, let's just make up it, and it dips down to 5.5, guess what's gonna happen? Everybody's gonna look to buy the house, and then it's gonna cost the cost of the house is gonna go up. If you've already bought the house, then you could just refinance down to the 5.5%. You don't have to fight everybody else trying to buy the house.
Correct. So the refinancing is always an option, which historically wasn't a big option. But I go back to when I started in banking in the early 90s, and my boss had a house loan with a 15%
Mhm.
interest rate. So the 7% is still not as scary as that 15% was, right?
No,
And I think my mom's house was somewhere in the 17 to 18% range when she bought her house in the 70s.
yeah.
So we're still not way up there. I would be surprised if in our current situation we would get that close in the next 10 years. I've been surprised before, as Dr. Christie knows. um, been surprised many times before. But so the other thing about buying a home now is if you're buying it what you can afford now, you get 30 years of that payment.
Mhm.
So if it's $2,000 a month now, just for example, then it's $2,000 a month 30 years from now if you stay in the same house and pay it over the time.
Mhm.
Most people don't. Most people get increases in salaries, change in jobs, increases in their businesses, and most people pay off their houses early anyway. So,
Well, it's interesting because I live in a neighborhood that's about 40 years old, and I actually have some neighbors that have lived in the house since the late 80s and early 90s. And I always laugh about because you can always look up the historical records, and it's like, or I've even talked to them about it. And it's funny with like how little they paid for the house. Some of them, their mortgage is so low or it's paid off. Their property in Florida, we're lucky we have homestead exemptions, so property taxes don't really increase, so they're paying next to nothing. And then their neighbor next to them bought the house 2 years ago, and it's comical how much they paid for the house, what the interest rate is, what the property taxes are. It's quite stunning the difference.
yeah, you can definitely see that. So there's a lot of benefit to just saying, "Hey, I need to buy a house today."
Mm,
Go ahead and, with the 7%, there's a lot of benefit because I always hear this, "I'm on a fixed income." Great. I'm on a fixed rent. How many people can say that they're on a fixed rent?
yeah,
Because
quite.
that's what your house payment is for 30 years. It's fixed at this price for 30 years. And with that idea, it's also assuming if you have it fixed at that point that you're never going to get a raise. And we all know that's not true. So,
That's true. Well, Christine, this has been great. I know we could probably do this for a few hours, and we might need a part two to it. But I think you provide us with a lot of good historical context and some strategies to start working towards that. It can be frustrating, but just like I always talk about on the other end of 2008 and how frustrating that was for me trying to get out of the gates personally and professionally, there was a lot of positives on the other side of that, and we may not know what the positives are on the other side of this inflation. But just do all the right things. Keep working hard. Try to do things that also increase your pay or your strategies within your business. and then maybe make some cuts that aren't going to harm your family or your business, and see where you can save 10% here and there in your personal and business budget, and you'll do good things. How can our audience reach out to you if they want to chat more about these, or if they're looking to take another level in their financial knowledge?
You can find me on my website, christineodell.com. And I have a couple of options there for I've got a book that I wrote called Rocking Your Business Finances. I have an online community. And just if you just want to ask me a question, just shoot me an email, Christine at christineodell.com, and I'll see if I can answer that question for you.
Perfect, and I'd highly recommend the book as well. And I again want to always thank you for your instrumental work in my financial knowledge and development. I can never thank you enough.
Well, thank you. I learned a lot from you as well.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you want to make the shift from busy, broke, and broken to time free and cash confident, or you just want to continue with the exponential growth, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. Look at the MCM Mastery tab, watch the short video on there, and check out what we are doing now for evidence-informed chiropractors. We are equal parts coaching and marketing done for you. Yes, you shoot some videos, we help you with campaign strategies and ideas and really become a thought leader in your community. You shoot those videos, you send them to us, we produce, edit, and brand them to you. Then we distribute them through all of your channels. We also take them and we turn it into one good blog per month. And every other month, we have Darcy Sullivan producing a robust blog with a topic that you pick from her database to help with your SEO. So we essentially become your content marketing agency to make sure your practice is always having ethical, elegant content marketing to help grow your practice. On the coaching side, we also help you with everything from marketing ideas to business, communications, finances, anything practice growth, and really try to help prevent you from being stuck on that island. And we hold you accountable. We have a great group of doctors that are just doing amazing things, and we look forward to help you out to take that next step in your practice. So again, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and learn more.